If you ever wanted to know how the average player can reach Masters rank, well, I'm covering it all in this video here. I recently embarked on a journey to take a guy who I'm coaching through Diamond rank and into Masters as we duo queue with one random. I'll talk about all the tips that will make the biggest difference in achieving this climb and what you're going to need to avoid as well. These tips will apply to the Storm Point split, so don't think just because I'm doing it on Kings Canyon that the tips won't work for other maps too. So let's get into it. Tip number 1, play cautious but not afraid. You need to look for specific fights from start to finish. The margin for error in these lobbies is so small. Everybody can shoot their gun and use their head in tactical ways. So you cannot afford to play careless and act like you'll just stomp the entire lobby. Now I know most of you don't think that you will do something like this, but way too often we would have a random teammate who felt obligated to search and destroy every single team that they found. And that's just not going to work in the highest elo of Apex. I don't care what you see your favorite pros do when they play ranked, we are not them. And we are definitely not them when we're solo queuing it with randoms. So we have to play more calculated. Some games, you'll have to be okay with fighting off drop, as long as it's what you deem to be a smart 50-50. If you're just full sending a drop into a POI with 3 other teams, hoping you get to fight last and come out alive, well, this isn't a sound strategy. You need to be more thoughtful in these lobbies. Looking for isolated fights will be key. It's definitely not always going to be possible. But if you have even an inkling of another team nearby, it's always going to be better to post up somewhere and stall or just leave the area entirely. I'll get into third parties a little bit later on in the video, but I think ultimately looking for fights that you and your teammates feel the most comfortable with is going to be optimal here. You never want to allow a team to bully you, so if you feel like you're just running from them constantly and that team is chasing you hard, then look for an opportunity to turn and burn on them. Good players don't run away, they reposition to find sure footing. Don't feel compelled to take a fight just for the need for KP if you don't think it will be a smart fight. Like too many times I see players throw their games just for a risky opportunity at getting some KP. And it's too bad, honestly. So what you need to do is just be patient. That is seriously some of the best advice because things will open up and opportunities will present themselves. Tip number 2, we have to talk about rotations. If you don't get zoned, you're at an instant disadvantage most games. The changes to the zone this season have really shaken up how rotations work. Most games, we would try to land labs, and 80% of the time, we would have to rotate halfway across the map toward the northwest corner of it. If your team doesn't have a Valk, then making large rotations across the map can be a treacherous thing. Especially because if there's a lot of teams remaining, which is going to be highly likely given the fact that most people are rotating within the first 80 seconds of the match, then you are bound to run into a bunch of teams. I tried my best to get rotating early. I always like this way rather than going in late. Because in the general situation, you can't control what happens if you go in late. Teams will try to hold you out if you're a few seconds late, or some random team will gladly try to fight you in the zone, so look out for these types of things. Beyond rotating early, I always tried to plan the rotation as soon as I knew where the circle was pulling next. It's good to have a plan B and C if you're trying to do this, because if you say, okay, we're gonna go here, but if a team's gonna hold us from this point, we can wrap around or use an ability to get past them. You know, whatever it is, just think ahead because this is gonna go a long way in improving your game sense. Low-key rotations is what I strive for. If I'm not looking for fight, I'm looking for the path of least resistance. I don't want to go through the center of the map in Death Valley or somewhere where I feel like it's bound that a ton of other teams are going to merge to. This may sound obvious, but you have to be calculated with your rotations depending on where you landed and where the circle's pulling to. Valkyrie can seriously help with large rotations, so I think that she's still a very solid pick this season despite Horizon getting picked a lot more. Because having the ability to take her ultimate and fly into a potentially safe spot in circle will be critical in most games. The games where you get zoned, don't try to overcomplicate it. You don't want to have to feel like, oh, we'll run out of circle to fight this team because it seems so easy. You really should think about your positioning here. Because later on in the game, positioning ends up playing such a huge role in who comes out alive. And obviously scanning survey beacons whenever possible to learn about the next ring location is insanely valuable information. Tip number 3, third party whenever possible, but be super aware if it's in the middle of the game. The reality is every team in these lobbies is preying off of third parties. It's not some secret, but it's just how it goes. So your team will need to take advantage of them at certain points too. But these mid-game pileups will occur. If you see anywhere from 9 to 13 squads left and there's a fight anywhere on the map that isn't very secluded, expect that fight to be 3rd, 4th, and 5th partied. You have to avoid these mid-game pileups as best as possible. Kings Canyon is bad enough as it is with fighting mid-game. And it's super risky most of the time because other teams are hearing those gunshots and thinking the same thing as you are. Let's get in on that. Storm Point will be better in this regard because the map is much bigger, but this point remains true on every single map. However, when you see an opportunity that's too good to pass up, you have to look to capitalize on it. A third party that requires little work on your end, but a few KP will go a long way. Another good idea would be a third party off drop, where let's say your team lands at labs and 2 teams go capacitor. You hear the shots in capacitor, you're very close to that, you think you can third party that pretty quickly, go for it. Once again, this example will work on any map. If you land at a POI, but you see 2 other teams at the neighboring POI, look to move quickly and capitalize off of them fighting. But if you miss that opportunity, don't stress out. If you don't get early KP, it's not the end of the world. I'm telling you, having patience will be key. There were so many games with randoms where I just didn't trust them, so we would literally try to get to top 5 with no KP, and we'd either win or get 2nd place with a few KP. And this will always be better than taking a -60 off drop. Tip number 4, you need a seer this season. Without this, you're seriously giving your team a disadvantage. I hate to say it because seer is so broken, but it's basically mandatory this season. Some people have even argued with me saying seer isn't OP, and I just have to say, if you're thinking that, you are not experienced in Apex Legends. And I'll break it down for you. Players have put in thousands, and I mean thousands of hours, perfecting their craft in this game, developing game sense, fine-tuning their aim and movement. And then boom, out of nowhere there's a legend who has a passive that can see all enemies through walls at all times. I mean, think about Wraith's passive for a second. I think I'm being aimed at, and often it doesn't work at all, or it's like 3 seconds too late. But it doesn't end there. His tactical can cancel revives, heals, abilities, give wall hacks, and show current health and shield bar to not only Seer, but his teammates. I mean, in what world is that balance? Someone who's not even in the fight can have that big of an impact on the outcome? I mean, just think for a second of all of the things you would have to do to achieve even half of those things that I listed as tactical without pressing one button. Last but not least, the crown jewel is his 2-minute cooldown ultimate that reveals all enemies' location actively to Seer and their teammates. And this lasts for 30 seconds. The problem is Seer lacks readability and outplay to the 10th most degree. And if you disagree with that, then you definitely haven't played in Diamond rank or above and had to deal with him from some of the highest level of players. Beyond having a Seer though, having 1 or 2 mobility legends is going to be extremely helpful for navigating rotations, closing the gap on an enemy, or escaping as you try to get higher placement when your squad gets quickly put down. You don't need 2 mobility legends, but you certainly can run them. A third pick that is a great option this season is Caustic, Gibby, or Newcastle. A defensive or offensive legend, depending how you're looking at it, is really helpful for the team. They're more of a support role, which is tough to say if you're solo queuing that you should play one, but they will be a necessary pick for your team during most games. Basically, every team you're going to play against in these lobbies will have a Seer in Season 14. So if you don't have one, you're kind of at a disadvantage. Tip number 5, if you have a string of bad games, take a break, even if it's only for 20 minutes. Try to reset your mental. This game mode is a whirlwind of emotions. You win a game, you feel great and on top of the world, but then you lose a couple off drop and you'll feel like a complete failure. Sometimes it'll take an hour just to gain a couple hundred RP, and then you can lose it all in like 10 minutes. Playing with randoms is taxing. Sure, occasionally you'll get a great teammate who is super helpful and is just a well-rounded player, but most games it felt like we were fighting on 2 fronts. The 57 other players in the lobby and a random teammate who would proceed to full send a team on their own and die shortly after. Whether you're solo or duo queuing it, you need to try to communicate with your mates. Try to establish some comms at the beginning of the game, just to call out helpful info. This will lend credibility to your randoms and let them know you're serious about trying to gain RP. Trust me, I don't like communicating with randoms any more than the next person, but I feel as if it's a necessary component when trying to reach one of the highest ranks in this game. I mean, most of the players in the lobby you're going up against will be communicating too. So if you guys aren't, well, you're putting yourself and your team at a disadvantage. And obviously, if these players are being toxic to you, there's no need to communicate with them. But not every player is going to be like that, so you have to give every person the benefit of the doubt to begin the game. If you follow these 5 tips and put in a good amount of time, I believe the average player can get to Master's rank in Season 14. Is it worth it? Well, that's up for you to decide. But if you're interested in 7 hard skills that will pay off forever in Apex Legends, I suggest you check out this video next. Thanks for watching. Peace.